Welcome, Bruins. We're glad to have you join us today, tonight, whatever time zone you're in, for our program for International Education Week. International Education Week commemorates the values of international education and exchange at universities throughout the U.S. each fall. The week is a joint initiative of the U.S. Department of State and the U.S. Department of Education, which reaffirms the values of International Education Week. This is also a partnership with UCLA's International Institute. At the start of the pandemic, we started a webinar series of conversations with Bruins living abroad during the corona outbreak. Today, we are checking in with previous panelists, current students and alumni, who will discuss their experiences since participating on the panel a year ago. I now want to introduce our moderator, alumnus John Arboleda, who has a Bachelor's of Arts in Latin American Studies and is a former UCLA Alumni Association Board of Directors member. John has 17 years living abroad, formerly from Los Angeles, now lives in Barcelona, Spain. Currently, he has his own coaching business. Formerly, he served as the head of primary and secondary education across Europe, Middle East, and Africa for Adobe. I'd like to now welcome John and the panelists.
Hello, thank you, Christine. Thank you, and thank you everyone who's joining us from wherever you're finding yourselves to join us as we're gonna have a great conversation with our panelists, our alumni panelists, and kind of revisiting a conversation that we had we were just saying actually a year ago to this date to be able to do that. And I appreciate the privilege to be able to moderate this panel, and I'll be introducing them shortly. So again, we're very grateful for the UCLA Alumni Association and all the supporting team that's made this possible. So if all of you are ready, I know our panelists are going to be ready, and we're going to just jump right into this if that's going to be good with you, if that's great with everyone. This is going to be a conversation. So as things start coming up for everyone who's joining us, throw your questions in the chat. We'll be addressing those throughout the course of the next hour. So whatever curiosities you got, things are coming up from what you're hearing, just throw those out there. We're going to try to answer as many of those as we can. And I'm going to introduce our panelists right now. So you're going to know a little bit about who they are, where they're at, and that can actually create some questions you're going to be having doing that. I'd like to introduce our first alumni panelist, Massimiliano Marinoni, class of 2012 from UCLA. He's currently just recently started his medical residency, and he's based in Rome, Italy. So we're welcome to have Massimiliano. You can just call him Max, he said, for short, so that would be great. One of our next alumni panelists, Victoria Frost from the class of 07. She's currently the Deputy Head of Student Services at the London School of Economics and Political Science based in London. And we're very glad to have her. And she's also the president of the UCLA United Kingdom Network. Just want to call that out. So we're glad to have Victoria with us here. We've got a soon-to-be graduating student at the end of this quarter, Pietro Mendez, who's going to be soon to be a class of 21 alumnus and joining the alumni club. Originally born in Brazil, but raised throughout different parts of Latin America. He's studying business economics, and after graduation, his intentions is to head to New York and get into the banking industry. And our other panelist that we have here is Nitya. Nitya's just graduated. She's a graduate of 21, and she's currently interning at the Climate Music Project, and she's currently based in Los Angeles, but originally from Panama. And our other panelist that we have here is Evelyn, who's a fourth-year undergraduate student originally from Canada, majoring in communications, and she'll be a class of 22 graduate. So these are our wonderful panelists who are going to be sharing their experiences a year later after we had a conversation. So with that being said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask one question. I'm going to ask all the panelists at the moment just to give us kind of a short reply to this question, and then we're going to jump into some other questions that we've got coming up. Okay, panelists, you ready? I see that. Wonderful. All right. So it says 1 year to the date, we're together having a panel, November 2020, right? The year when COVID and the pandemic had, entered our lives in a variety of ways. November 2020 was a period where we're still seeing the tail end of 2020 going into that. Now, a year later, it'd be great if you can just give us a really short update since that time a year ago. What's going on with you at the moment? If you can just let us know. And I'll just kind of start here. I'm just gonna go off who I'm seeing here on the panel, on the list, and we'll just go from there. Okay, just a short update. What's been going on? So Max, let's start with you, please.
Okay. Hi, everyone. So yeah, a couple of things have happened since we last spoke. I finished my medical degree, and when we spoke last time, I was still living in Milan. I was in my lockdown mode, and then everything opened up again, and I was able to move down to Rome, where I started my residency and in hematology, and things are looking good for now. I look forward to getting to see more of the city in the coming months.
Thanks, Max. We'll look forward to hearing more about you and more of it later. Next, I like this, Nitya. What's going on with you since the last year?
Yeah, first of all, hi guys. Thank you for having me again this year. So last year I was back home in Panama taking Zoom classes from my childhood bedroom. And this year I am now officially graduated. I received my diploma, which is really exciting. And I'm currently interning for the Climate Music Project, which John was talking about, which is this unique nonprofit that works on raising climate change awareness through music. We actually had a really big event last Friday. The nonprofit is based off in SF, but I'm working remotely for them. So we went down to SF, me and a couple of the other interns, just to help out with the event. Yeah, I'm still in that transitionary stage right now where I'm moving from being in college and not wanting to let it go because, of course I missed a whole year of it. And then trying to find, different job positions to kind of build on my skill set. So that's where I'm at right now.
Thanks, Nitya. And you know what? I mean, that's probably a big word that we've all lived is some type of transition. Some of it by choice, some of it by the effect of the current situation we've been in. So it's understandable to be in that situation. So thanks for sharing that, Nitya. Let's go to Pietro.
Hi, everyone. Again, thank you so much for having me here. I'm super excited. And a year ago, I don't think I actually was part of the panel a year ago, but a year ago I was living in Brazil. Yeah, in November I was still in Brazil, but about to go to Argentina because during the pandemic, I have family in both countries. And then during the pandemic, I tried to stay a little bit in each place. But life was very different, definitely. Like Nitya said, I was taking Zoom classes. I had really no clear idea of what I would do all my summer and after I graduated. And then during the beginning of this year, actually, I came back to this year, I meant January, I came back to LA, and this is where I've been since. And now, as John mentioned, I'm graduating at the end of this year, moving to New York next year. So I'm really excited. Life definitely changed a lot for this past year, but I'm really excited to be back in LA.
Great. Thanks, Pietro, and thank you for sharing that. Hearing you and Nitya were both in your home countries or with relatives doing your classes, and now you've been able to come back, and now there's other transition, and the situation is we're still in this other phases of this kind of situation that we're living in, and we're adapting to that as we're going. So thank you for sharing that. Evelyn, how would you like to share what's been going on since the last year?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you all for having me back here. It's super exciting. As for me, I'd say last year, just like Nitya and Pietro, I was also doing Zoom classes in Canada with my relatives, and now I'm, back in LA, back on campus. I'm an RA, so I'm still like living on the hill, so it feels like I'm like right back where it all started. And I'm also in the same building as I was in my first year, so that's even, even, even better. And just kind of getting used to the flow of life on campus, kind of diving back into commitments and like in-person classes. It's been a very interesting transition period. Even now it's like week 8, right? And it still feels like there's so much to get used to. But yeah, just living the life over here.
Great. Thank you, Evelyn. It's great. It's wonderful to have you and Pietro back on campus. And I can only, so it's great to have you there. And let's hear from Victoria. Victoria, what's been going on since the last year with you?
Thanks, John. Good evening or good morning, evening over in London to everybody. So the pandemic has been really interesting for me. I work at the London School of Economics, so LSE, and I work in student support. And actually, in January 2020, when we were first kind of learning about coronavirus, I stepped up to be the lead for all student COVID policies, cases, situations, thinking that we were talking about students from Wuhan, China, who potentially would have traveled to London. And that was the extent of what I thought I was signing up for. And if I had only known, I might not have put myself forward for that position. But I spent most of the last year working on COVID. It felt like 24/7. It wasn't quite that, but it was every single day. So I worked every weekend day. In the UK, we went through 3 different lockdowns. For the first 2, I moved into student residence halls, so that because our halls stayed open, and we needed managers around. So I did that for the first lockdown, and then the November lockdown. So a year ago, today I was living in a student hall and helping deal with a large number of COVID cases on campus. And then, but I've actually changed jobs since then. So in May, I changed roles within LSE, and I no longer deal with COVID exclusively. And I look after mental health and well-being and disability services. And it's been really interesting to me to kind of take a step back from solely focusing on COVID all the time, and to think more about how we come out of it and what that looks like, and how we support students and how we move forward, and how we help people who whose mental health might have deteriorated over the pandemic, and how we help support them now.
Thank you, Victoria. And it's great to see, and congratulations on that new role you got. It's going to be really needed as people are really trying to understand what's going on and what do these transitions mean as they're encountering and facing those. And it's great that LSE's offering that, and like many other campuses across the globe are doing that. We'll be visiting some of the stuff that you've been talking about. And what I'd like to ask now, and I'm going to preface it with, I know with some of the students, some of you're based in, you're already in, or recent grads or students, you could be based, or you're back in Los Angeles. So the question I'm going to ask, you may think about your situation where your family's at, where you're natively coming from, to think about that, because people already know what's going on in Los Angeles. So my question is about, what's the current COVID situation like as you're experiencing it, where you're at the moment? So again, for students or recent grads, you can talk about Panama, Canada, or in your case, Pietro, I don't know if it's going to be Brazil or Mexico or wherever that's going to be like. But again, what's your current situation with that? I'll just jump in real quickly. As Christine said, I'm based in Barcelona, Spain, where I've been living the last 11 years. Here, the situation is in Spain, like across Europe, there's an upward trend happening. There's this 6th wave that's happening at pretty much everywhere. In Spain, we're seeing an upward trend. In some other European countries, it's a lot stronger what you're seeing that. There are some conversations talking about quarantine or lockdown again to be able to do that. Here, we've got about a 79% vaccination rate, which is quite good. based here in Spain. But this is what the current situation is. Life is the current normal that it is. People are going to school. Students are in school. People are working. There's a lot of return hybrid environments. They're still being defined regarding that. Using masks on public places and situations to be able to do that. And then when you're traveling across European countries, we get something called a green pass or special pass that shows you're vaccinated. That's allowing you to go into certain countries to be able to do that. That's the current situation that we're seeing here. And who wants to jump in regarding sharing a bit of what their current situation is, or your family situation in your home country?
Yeah, I think I guess it makes sense, I guess, that I would just jump in right after you, John, because our countries are so similar in terms of where we're at right now. Essentially everything that you just said, I've been seeing in Italy. I guess the only thing I would want to add, and I don't know if this is happening in Spain, I hope it's not, but it's really tense here in Italy right now. There's been a lot of protests. Essentially, all those who don't fall into the 80%, more or less, are people who, not all of them, but a lot of people who actively decided not to get vaccinated. They don't want to actively participate, I guess, in the vaccine program. And because of the Green Pass that you just spoke of, clearly, from a certain point of view there, freedom is being limited, as they would put it. And it's been tense here in Italy. There's been a lot of protests, and the government has been trying to figure out like what the next step is. How can we keep this going in such a way that it doesn't create a fracture within the population? So yeah, I mean, I think our countries are in a very similar spot. I hope there's less tension on your side.
Great. Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that, Max, and kind of a perspective on what kind of you're experiencing and seeing a bit in Italy there. Who else of the panelists would like to share about what the current situation is like? And I leave that open in terms of how you want to address what the situation is regarding that. Who'd like to go next? Nitya?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about Panama, I guess, and also kind of compare it to the situation in LA, because I keep hearing from my parents every day. So vaccination wise, I think Panama is doing pretty good, surprisingly. I didn't see that coming, but Panama has had high vaccination rates, and they even started giving the boosters already. I know a couple of friends of mine who are working in the medicine field, they're med school students, they already have gotten the boosters. So there are students are going back to school, whether it's like high school, middle school, or university, college level students. My parents are both vaccinated, thankfully, but there's still that air of, uncertainty and fear of completely going outside and doing exactly what you used to do before. There's still mask mandates indoors, and I think outdoors as well, actually. So there's still tight regulations, but I guess along with the pandemic, similar to what Max is saying, there's a lot of unrest. There has been a lot of sort of government corruption that has been come out to light due to the pandemic, and just decisions that officials in the government have made that people are not really content with. So there have been protests and unrest in Panama as well, from what I know. LA, so different from what my parents are living right now. I feel a lot more secure being here. I've gotten both my vaccines, and up until like 3 weeks ago, actually, I would have said that I was pretty much living a fairly different life than Panama and, going out, doing what I wanted to do. But then 2 or 3 weeks ago, a couple of my really close friends that I was hanging out with tested positive for COVID, and they've been quarantining for, I think all of them get out today, actually. They like tested on their PCR and now they're negative. So kind of like realizing that the fear is still there, it was kind of a wake-up call for me, because I felt like life was practically going back to normal, that everything was all right. But then these friends that I see almost every day tested positive. And then I just realized, it's still not over. Like, we still need to be cautious. We still need to be wearing masks. So that was a really hard hitting, moment of like awakening that like, oh, okay, this is not over yet. So yeah.
Yeah. Just something to add, something that's interesting regarding the day-to-day life. So at least in Southern Europe, there's a lot of proximity when you meet. It's a lot of, when you see someone, you kiss them on the cheeks, you see that. And a year ago, you were doing the elbows and doing that. Now that people are vaccinated or not, we don't know what to do sometimes, right? And that people miss that proximity to that closeness. And sometimes now I'm shaking hands, and sometimes we're doing that. It's really interesting how the social dynamics of folks is also changing. What was a norm for given, what's that going to look like in terms of our mental shift, our psychological shift, and what's been going on with that. Would someone else want to add regarding the current situation that they'd like to share, and what they're seeing? Go ahead, Victoria.
Thanks. Just really quickly, because it's interesting to hear the different perspectives in different countries. So in the UK, we are administering booster vaccines for anyone who's been 6 months out from their second. So I had my booster a couple of weeks ago, and I personally was very excited about getting that and feeling better about that. I think there's one of the things that I find interesting, because we're a very international university, similar to UCLA. So we have students from all over the world, and their different experiences, and they're from their home countries and coming here. And so we have students who are coming and are nervous about the fact that that the UK approach is kind of living with COVID as opposed to getting to zero COVID, like other places around the world, and how we help people think about what that means. And it's kind of an additional culture shock to see. Masks are required on public transportation here. At LSE, we're doing small classes in person, and large classes are delivered online, and masks are required in classes and lifts and in one-to-one meetings, but they're not required kind of in other aspects of campus. And that's different for different people. And I think it's been, how are we talking about what safe looks like? How are we helping people to understand why we are doing the things that we're doing? And but it's also, what measures do we put in place? And so we have mandatory testing similar to UCLA and many other schools, and how does that help people feel slightly more secure, and remind people that it is still prevalent. And I think we're hearing the same things, students being surprised when their tests come up positive, but following the safety advice and going from there.
Thank you. And if someone else wants to jump in, let me know. Otherwise, we're getting some questions from our viewers already to be able to do that. So again, panelists, as you want to jump in, let me know. I know some of the questions are going to be able to do that. So thank you for sharing some of those insights. So we got a question coming in from a viewer already regarding how have the vaccine mandates impacted your feeling of safety in regards to living in this quote unquote new normal version of life, to be able to do that? Anything coming up for people regarding, anyone want to address that question regarding the vaccine mandates? And I think that's probably give some context. I think it's going to vary by country and region. We're seeing some governments saying that government employees need to come in and have, Italy has passed one of the first laws, I think, in Europe, that is really strict about all civil servants have to be coming in with the vaccine to be able to do that, or they're not going to be able to be employed to be able to do that. So we're seeing a lot of things like that coming up. That's adding to a lot of what Max was talking about, the divide that we're beginning to see. Anything coming up for people that want to share regarding what they're hearing or the pulse of what's going on in their respective places in terms of the question from this viewer regarding the mandates impact and feeling of safety or things? Pietro, I see you're off.
Yes,
you're off.
I think I can jump in there.
Sure.
And honestly, this past few months, my mind kind of changed a little bit in regards to the vaccine mandate. Of course, I think it's great. And I used to feel a lot safer, especially when I got back to LA after I got my 2 shots. As Nithya mentioned, life kind of went back to normal, especially during summer. Everyone was already mostly vaccinated and cases were really low in LA. But just like Nithya, 3 weeks ago, my roommates tested positive to COVID after getting both of his vaccines. And then later on, my other 2 roommates tested positive, all of which had gotten their vaccines. So it's a lot of what Nithya mentioned, that yes, I feel a lot safer, and there's no doubt about that. I also have asthma, so I've always kind of have like the fear of catching COVID. But after the vaccine, this fear kind of went away. But unfortunately, it's something that we might have to live with, if even with the vaccines, even if everyone gets vaccinated, the mutations with, I don't really know how COVID works, but essentially a lot of people have been getting it lately. And luckily, the symptoms have never been really bad. None of them needed to be hospitalized. So it makes me think, like, how much, after the vaccine, of course, how much will COVID still be like a big thing? You know, why? Maybe it will be just like the flu, or maybe just like a strong cold. And yeah, so I would say that my view on the vaccine mandate, or at least how safe I feel, changed a little bit in the past few months, because more people have been contracting COVID even after the vaccine.
Thank you for sharing that, Pietro. Okay. Another question that's come up is regarding your current student or work situation that you're at in your sector. What is the current, you know, what's different in your current work or student situation where you're at now regarding this? I know we touched a little bit about this, but to go a little bit further regarding what you're seeing, whether it's in Max, you're in medicine, you know, or Victoria, where you're at in the higher ed sector over here. But what stands out for you in terms of what's different in your current situation, in your work situation, or even your student situation at the moment? Would like to jump in with that.
Well, yeah, I think this also gives me a bit the opportunity to touch upon something that Pietro was talking about. So essentially, like, what happens moving forward, because vaccinated people are still contracting the virus. Their tests are positive. They're not ending up in the hospital as much, which is essentially the main point. But I work with patients who have a suppressed immune system. All sorts of oncological patients, but especially hematological patients. What we've seen, and this is unfortunately coming up now after months since they've done their first round of vaccinations, is that they don't manage to build up an immune response to the vaccine. So one thing is to get the vaccine done, and then the second part of that equation is, so how did I respond to that vaccine? How prepared was my body to get the factory going and getting these antibody levels up and getting an actual protection? So that's changed a lot for us. We are very paranoid. Hematological wards have been moved to strategical parts of hospitals to keep them as far as possible from the other parts of the hospitals where people come in routinely. They just need to come in for checkups, either for skin problems or nothing that is remotely related to COVID. So we've really separated hospitals in such a way that the people who are most in danger in case they were to get COVID, they're as far away as protected as possible, and we're very paranoid to keep them protected. So I would say I've seen that change, like since when I was going for my internships pre-COVID. I would say the hospital environment has become a lot more controlling and more of a bubble, and just really trying to get these patients as protected as possible, because unfortunately, even after a third dose, because some of our patients have already gone through their third dose, they still don't have an adequate vaccine response.
Thank you, Max, for sharing that. What about for students? How's the situations changed for you? You know, you were on Zoom, and then you're going back to back and in classes. So I'm curious for Evelyn, how's the situations different being a student pre and post with the situation that you've been having and you're at now?
Yeah, I mean, right now it definitely feels like kind of we're midway between the full transition. We still have lots of hybrid form classes. Lots of classes are recorded, lots of classes are still, online or have online versions. And so it's a very interesting mix of kind of the pre-pandemic mode of activity versus where everything is now. Also, in addition, other commitments as well have also been tempered by new regulations. For example, if we want to eat anywhere or if we want to host any sort of activities, we need to, ensure that all participants have their COVID survey symptom monitors and all of these additional regulations, like, masked on all the time. And, that also does contribute to kind of the feeling of security, engaging in like activities and in classes on campus, but it also serves as this constant reminder, that this is still a very real, very prevalent issue that is still going to be around for quite a while. And, such is the case that I've seen in all of my roles, even on and off campus. So it's a very interesting mix.
Yeah. And then Evelyn, I'm just building on that, and I'd ask Pietro and Nitya, who just recently graduated, what's that meant like for when you think about your student experience, just your own student experience that you're individually having? What's that situation like? And since you're about to graduate or you just graduated, you knew what it was a few years ago. What can you share about how that's impacting, or what's it mean to how you're living your student experience at the moment?
I will say that it does admittedly feel more restrictive to kind of like how at least I myself may experience the full breadth of the student experience. There are loads of activities and other like events and things like that I kind of hesitate at like looking into or participating in, just because, some activities require large crowds or, you know, just things like that. But I will also say that, the added precautions and stuff have also added this layer of like this additional layer of freedom, at least in my case. Before, I used to have experiences being, a little bit nervous in large crowds and things like that. And now with the additional safety precautions and, this new like mask mandate and everything like that, it's also made it's this very interesting like seesaw, this very interesting balance, in which I do feel a little bit more less confined in a way, in like doing my own thing and like exploring, Santa Monica, as long as I have, the safety regulations and precautions. But there's also additionally that other side where it's like a lot of things that traditionally I would have done maybe as a student, had I still been as I were in my first or second year, have definitely been changed and constrained slightly. But it's definitely like overall, definitely I would say that it's a very intriguing kind of new experience to wade into.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Nitya or Pietro, you want to add something to that? If not, there's some other questions coming in regarding.
I can quickly add something that I think it's pretty relevant. When I went back to Brazil, so March of 2020, when everything started, and I saw that things were overextending, and essentially I would be in Brazil for a significant amount of time of my college career. I was talking to my parents, and classes were online up until last spring, so last June. However, after talking to my parents, I decided still to come back here in January, even though I would still be taking class from my computer. But the reason was, are you really going to college abroad if you're not abroad? Is just staying in your room and taking, I don't know, 3 hours of class daily and then going on about your life in Brazil, where I was, I don't know, having dinner, lunch with my family. Is that going to college abroad? And for me, it wasn't. I felt like I was missing out on a lot, especially because I had already had the experience of my first and almost 5 quarters at UCLA before. So this is why I decided to come back. And I also feel like since I'm graduating a little bit soon, I felt anxious about coming back because I felt like the more time I spent in Brazil, the less of a college experience I was having. And I know how much I applied to UCLA in the first place because I knew everyone I talked to had an amazing experience here, and it was really important for defining who they became. So I felt like I needed to come back.
No, thank you for sharing that. And I think the resiliency of the students has been, outstanding, how you've been able to do this, and how you've been able to shift and being able to continue that experience in ways that no one was imagining, and that you've been able to continue and go forward with that. There's a question coming up from a panelist that I want to throw there and kind of begin to shift here. And again, if something comes up that you wanted to address, feel free to panelists feel free to come and do that. And the question from the panelist is, what would you say to your pre-pandemic self that would have prepared you for what was to come? I'll give you a second. I'll read it again because I think this is one that may need some reflection on it. What would you say to your pre-pandemic self that would have prepared you for what was to come? Nitya?
Yeah, weirdly enough, the moment I had read that question in the chat during the panel, and I was like, that's a really, really good question. I was thinking about it, and I feel like for me, I am not really used to dealing with uncertainty. I had everything from freshman year on to like when I was going to graduate, like planned out. Like I knew that I was going to do my summer abroad and my sophomore year to fulfill like my global studies requirement in New York. And that I was going to, have like family travels in the middle, and that I was going to try to find an internship back home over the summer of third year so that I could figure out if I like, working in Panama and what that experience would be like. And everything kind of just fell apart. Like I had a professor in junior year, like right before the pandemic happened, who was actually going to come to Panama to do some research. So she was studying like history of feminism, and she was going to come to Panama, do some research. She asked me, would you like to be my research assistant? I was like, 100%. I want to know what it's like to work in my home country, and it would be great to work with a UCLA professor there. And, at the end of the day, she canceled her trip. It didn't happen. I didn't get an internship in my most formative year, which is like third year, right? That summer is so important. And then I was doing like another little internship at UCLA, but like remotely from my room, with my parents coming in the morning, giving me breakfast while I was at meetings. And so the whole thing just made me realize that I had to be okay with uncertainty, and that I had to marinate in that uncertainty and realize that I don't need to have every single thing about my life planned out. I was in my senior year, and I knew that I wanted to come back because I needed to find work opportunities, internships, gain those skills, which is the whole reason why I came to the States. And all of that was kind of like, I had no idea what was going to happen. I came back in February. I still didn't know what I was going to do. My classes were still remote. I didn't know how I could network, how I could, meet different people, try to get into my job industry that I'm interested in. So I actually wrote a song about this over the pandemic, just like learning to deal with the uncertainty and being okay with not knowing where you're going to be in a week from now or a month from now. And that was the biggest thing that I think if I would have told that to myself in January 2020, or when I had to like pack my bags like in 2 days to leave the country, if I would have known that from that moment, I would have felt so much more relaxed, and my mental health would have done so much better. But learning it throughout during the pandemic also had its own kind of learning experience where I had to be okay with it. So yeah, that's what it would be for me.
What's the title of your song? Does your song have a title?
It's actually Uncertainty. Thank you for asking, but it was a really critical word for me in 2021, I'd say.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Would anyone else want to address that thing? What would you say to Victoria, please? What would you say to your pre-pandemic Victoria?
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, gosh, I wish pre-pandemic Victoria had better vision than I did. But I think, and we've done lots of work as an institution to reflect on what went well and what we could do differently. And I think there's a couple of things, there's two things that I would have said. So one is ask for help earlier. So I feel like I took the role I was given and was like, yes, I can do this. And then the role didn't change, but the magnitude of it did. And I should have reached out earlier. And I think that that's good advice. I need to keep remembering that asking for help is a good thing, and that that's helpful. And then one thing that I ended up doing, writing out specifically and taping it to the wall of the student hall that I was in was, are students safe? Is my staff safe? And everything else is gravy, right? So I need to not, similar to Ntia and kind of not be focusing on certainty. Mine was not being focused on perfection. And I was doing stuff, but I wasn't going to get everything done. My email inbox is still horrific. And prior to the pandemic, I never had more than 20 emails in my inbox. And I'm loath to share how many are in there now, but I'm working on it and I'm getting there, and but I have to prioritize, and everyone's resources are limited. So what's the focus? And for us, it was keeping students safe, keeping students supported, fed when they were isolating, all of those kinds of things, making sure my staff was okay, and everything else I needed to let go of. And so I think that's been a really helpful lesson for me. And I wish I'd slightly heard that earlier, but I'm glad that I have that now.
Great. Thank you for sharing that, Victoria. And that's wonderful awareness that you've been sharing even about your own self regarding what becomes priorities and being able to do that. It's okay if the inbox isn't being fully addressed, because there's other things more important. And with Nitya, about how you're managing and addressing uncertainties, it's fantastic. Would anyone else like to, we get some other questions, but anyone else want to address that pre-pandemic one? I want to, their self. Max.
Well, I mean, I just wanted to say that I think that what Nitya and Victoria touched upon are really, I think it all, for me at least, like going off of what they were saying as well, is just, in the end, you have to kind of let life come to you. Instead of, that's just one thing that I took from this, is that I always wanted to have control over life and then kind of guide through it. And I wouldn't ask for help because I thought, I have control. But then when something like this hits you, and I guess it was the second time in my young life, because when we had the huge economic crisis in 2008, that was also a huge moment for us. We didn't know what was going to come next. And you always want to try to hold on. When things start spiraling, you try to grab onto something, and it can really become stressful. So at some point, when I had an internship planned in Canada that I was really looking forward to, and that didn't happen, and at some point I just had to be like, okay, this is way beyond me and my life, and just let it come to you. And then the next step, as soon as you step out of the woods, at some point it's going to be clear where you ended up. And that's something that I learned through this pandemic. And I guess I would have told the pre-pandemic self, just to avoid having so much anxiety and so much stress, just let go, I guess.
Right. Thanks, Max. And it's absolutely normal that people would be feeling those types of things and happening, and that, again, great awareness regarding that. Building on that, and kind of similar on that line, because the word came up earlier, I think, when we were in transitions that people have been going through. And when you're thinking about what some of you were sharing already, what you've learned from this experience, some of it by choice, some of it just by, it's right in front of me and I'm having to learn some things about myself or what's going on. When you're looking ahead, what are some transitions that you've gone through, or that you've decided to make some bigger shifts on, that you weren't aware of, that now you're saying, wait a second, this has happened? I don't know, Nitya, maybe you're gonna become a songwriter to do that. I don't know, but what's been some big shifts or big changes that happened as a result of this that probably were not in your initial plan when you're looking ahead?
I guess there's something that I want to bring up, and it's not about a big transition, but it's also something that, with all the bad things that happened during the pandemic, I feel like there's the need to say that, like, I always believe that everything that's bad has something good to it.
Mhm.
And in my case was when I left home to go to college, I kind of had this idea in my mind that I would never come back and live with my parents, never really live with my family. I would only be there for holidays, for summers, vacations, whatever. But then all of a sudden I found myself living with them for almost a year. And I cannot emphasize how much I love that. Just being back with them after like growing up, after living by myself, I had a lot more responsibilities when I was living here in LA. And then just seeing the way that my life used to work before coming to UCLA was just really amazing for me. And it was really great. You know, it was a period where even my parents realized that as well. So we got a lot closer, and I just really enjoyed having breakfast, lunch, dinner with my family, something that I had never expected would happen again.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. I'll just tap on another question I had. We all know how much loss and challenges everyone lived. And it's also great that you added that, Pietro, seeing what came out of that was unexpected, that had goodness around it. So feel free, thank you for sharing that with the relationship with your parents. Anyone else regarding that unexpected surprise that came up, or transitions that you may have been kind of shifted in where you see yourself going? Nitya, go ahead.
Well, funnily enough, John, you did mention me being a songwriter. That was my first song that I wrote over the pandemic because I was taking a songwriting course remotely from UCLA for my music industry minor. So I feel like, taking that class pushed me to do something that I have always wanted to do, but never was able to achieve. And I was viewing Zoom University from a very negative perspective always, in the sense that I'm not able to do this in person. I'm not able to meet up with my classmates, and the collaborative environment just didn't feel as powerful as it does when you're with them in person. But I was able to achieve some really incredible things over Zoom University, instead of meeting up with someone, we were setting up separate Zoom meetings to collaborate on a song, or messaging on GroupMe or texting and all of these different things. I guess it was just the resilience of human nature and finding a different way when something doesn't work out was really surprising to me. And I would have never been able to do write a song or focus more on doing music if I didn't have all that time around me. Because whenever I'm at UCLA, I'm so busy meeting up with my friends, doing this, doing extracurriculars, doing this or that. I never had that space to fully, explore this part of something that I've always wanted to, but never could. But now that I was in my, old childhood room, I had all my instruments around me. I bought a couple of, things for equipment and was able to really focus on making music. And for me, that allowed me to really hold on. That was my savior, I call it, over 2021. But it was incredible to me that we don't really appreciate human adaptability as we should, because I wasn't able to see these people in person. I wasn't able to see my friends who were all in different time zones because they're also international. Wasn't able to see them in person or anything, but we found a way. I came back and everything was as it was when we had left. We were still tight. We set up 3-hour Zoom calls. We were doing game nights and trivia nights over Zoom, just something to be able to feel that connection, which was really great. So.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. It's fantastic. There's a question that a panelist asked. I'm going to build on this one. But Nitya, if you got the song on YouTube or something, just put it on the chat. We'd like to see it though when it's ready. Okay, so there's a wonderful question that just builds on this: is how has your sense of community changed or adjusted regarding this? Because Zoom became a part of our, whatever platform we were using, that became an extended community. New friendships, new relationships were built across people we've never met. I've worked with amazing colleagues I've never haven't yet to meet in person, and I can't wait to see them and embrace them at some point, or, you know, working with them. And, you know, for me, it was surprising that you can build such meaningful, strong relationships in this way. Before it was just a chat, a family chat, a friend chat. But here we was, you know, studying, writing a song together, working together, delivering projects. So how has your sense of community changed or adjusted? Who'd like to jump in on that one? And we had about just under 10 minutes left. I want to leave one final question for folks, but thank you for the viewers throwing in questions. But the community changed or adjusted. Who'd like to go with that?
Can I jump in and
Victoria?
talk about the UCLA network? Because I think
Go for
that's
it.
been a really big change for me. And it's been, I guess, similar to Pietro, a silver lining in a sense. And I became the president of the UCLA network about 8 months before the pandemic started, and had all these grand plans, and then all of a sudden you can't do any events and we can't get together, and what does that mean, and how you know, I was desperate to connect with others, to still have those connections, to meet people, to have fun, and how do we do that? And it was really, we did, so in the UK group, we have a monthly get together called Triple T, and we move those online. And what does that look like when you can't? It's a pub night, and how do you do a pub night online? But we made it work, and there's been, you know, and we had a much bigger audience because people could come from wherever, and it wasn't about having to work in London. So we had people from all over Europe. Occasionally we had people from California join. And that was really fun. And from there, we kind of built up other opportunities. And I mean, being able to be here and do this session with people all over the world, without having to travel, without the kind of carbon footprint that all involves, is really interesting. We did I did Dinner for 12 Strangers last year online, and we had people from Europe, we had people from the UK, Julie was on it, we had some students, some who were in UCLA and some who were at their home, doing this you know, online eating, chatting, connecting. And I think that's really helped us build our network. And now that we're back and able to do some events in person. So we did a UCLA Game Watch party a couple of weeks ago in person, and it was so nice to be back and to see people and it to feel kind of more normal. But we're still thinking about what are the events that we can do online, and how do we keep some of that aspect of building community across a wider sense, being able to engage with all UK UCLA Bruins, and not just those who are physically in London. And so I think that's really exciting, and has definitely changed, I think, my sense of what community is and how we can build that. And I know people are tired of everything being on Zoom, but how do we keep some of the positive aspects, and where do we fit those into building that sense of alumni community?
Yeah. No, thanks, Victoria. And that's a great example how Zoom at first was invading us. And then you're talking about the shift of how we can take control of Zoom and make it more a way to build community by choice that's needing to be able to do that, and balancing in person. And now you can still use Zoom to reach people in other parts of the UK or Europe that may not be able to do that. And I just got to give a call out to, I think, the amazing alumni leaders and volunteers and the UCLA team that have shifted in a really amazing way to engage students and alumni regarding this. And I think it's been great, because maintaining a community is not, it's challenging in these situations. So I think it's been great, I think, for UCLA, how they've been able to do that and still feel connected, especially many of us as students or us living abroad, to be connected. It's been great. We got 5 minutes left. Anyone else want to jump in on the something with community before we start doing some wrap-up questions? And I'm going to want to hear from each of the panelists on a wrap-up question. But anything regarding this new sense of community and what that's meaning. All right. We got 4 minutes left, and we could keep going on. I couldn't even get through all the questions. And this has just been a really amazing and wonderful conversation, and appreciate how everyone's just been, you know, sharing and doing that. It is okay, for the holiday season, we're right around to start the holiday season. In the US, Thanksgiving's taking place. You know, I'm actually getting on a plane for the first time in 2 years to go to the States, you know, later this week to be out there. And after Thanksgiving, and then it's after that, December is going to be, you know, the holiday season going on. I'd like to know, and I know the audience will know, what are you going to be doing this holiday season to be able to do that? So, you know, I love these beautiful smiles that I'm seeing on these people's faces here, but what are your plans over this holiday season while we're still in this next phase of our current situation? Who'd like to go over what's your plans for the holiday season?
I think I'll go first.
Yeah.
I'll go first just so we can end on a positive note with everybody else, because I will be working this holiday season, but I'm gonna be in a beautiful city, so I'm excited anyway. As soon as I get out of the hospital, I'll probably go look for some beautiful monument with some amazing light show or something.
Okay.
But
But
yeah.
by the way, everyone, Max is in Rome, and I'm going to Rome for Christmas with my family. My wife's from there, and I invited Max as an open invitation. When he's not in doing his residency, he can come to my wife's house, and we'll be happy to give him dinner and host them. That's part of the UCLA community, and it's out there. This is UCLA. This is what we do. So come on and you can join us. So now you know what I'm doing for the holidays. We're going to be in Rome and doing a bit of a road trip. So everyone else, thanks, Max. And I look forward to seeing you in Rome and celebrating a meal with you. Who else? Pietro, what are you doing over the holidays?
So since I'm graduating now, I am applying for my visa and I can't really leave the country. So usually I would go back to Argentina and spend Christmas with my family there. But since we're not going to be able to do that, they're coming here and we're going to New York.
Wonderful.
So and it's the first time I'm going to be in New York for Christmas. So I'm really excited.
And great. And now you can share that with this like new expanded found relationship that you have with your parents to be able to do that. All right. Let us know how that goes. Nitya, what are you doing for the holidays?
I'm in a similar stage as Pietro, where because I'm on my OPT visa, I don't want to be, moving around because I don't know what's going to happen if I try to come back into the country and stuff. I know that my parents are going to be in Panama and my sister's going to visit them. Actually, she's leaving this Monday. It was all very, out of the blue. And my parents are trying to convince me to go to Panama as well, since my sister's going to be there and her husband as well. I don't know if I'm actually going to do it. If I do, it's probably going to be a super last minute decision. Like, once I've secured a good, job where I can be sure that I will be able to come back into the country. But right now it seems as if it's in the air. But I do know that like 2 weeks from now, I'm planning on going to the Grove with my friends to look at the Christmas decorations and the fake snow that falls all the time in LA. So that'll be something fun that will, make it feel like it's the holiday season.
Thanks. And I wish you and have wonderful. Thanks for sharing it. Evelyn, what are you doing for the holidays? What's your plans?
Well, let's see, for the Thanksgiving break, at least, I'll be staying on campus, resuming with my RA duties and maybe doing a Friendsgiving with some of my other friends here. And then for the winter holidays, at least, I will be flying back to Canada to go visit my family again. And, it'll be nice to just catch up after being separated for a long time. So I'm excited for that.
Great, wonderful. Victoria, your holiday plans?
So I actually bought my first house in the last year, which is very exciting. So thank you. I'm having my mom and my sister over for Christmas, and it'll be a small Christmas. Our other sister, so both my mom and my sister live in London, and they're coming over. Our other sister lives in Barcelona, and she won't be coming over because we're just unsure about travel and being able to get back to work and all those kind of things. And so that'll be slightly different, but looking forward to doing some things and hopefully to not work quite as much as I did. So sorry, Max, and I appreciate the work that you're doing. Personally, I'm glad last year I worked every day over the Christmas break, and I'm hoping to get some more of those off this year.
Great. We are at the hour, actually just a bit over, And I would like to give a heartfelt thanks to all of our panelists for really sharing their experiences and what's been going on with them, how they've been living it, how they've been transitioning to it, and finding really a lot of goodness in this situation. I want to thank Christine and Danielle from Team Alumni for putting this together, for inviting us, and for all the work that went on to be able to do this. We're glad to be part of the International Week that's happening, to be able to do this, how the world's become even more global virtually, to be able to do this. So on behalf of everyone, and the viewers who've made this possible to watch, who joined us for this, thank you very much. Really want to wish everyone a happy holiday season, safe travels, wherever you're going to be doing, virtually or not, with your families and friends, to be able to do that. And I'm hopefully we'll be invited to do a panel a year from now. Let's see where that's going to be at, November 17th, a year from now, doing this panel to see what we'll be talking about. Thank you, panelists. It's been a pleasure. Max, I'll see you in Rome. Christine, have your sister reach out to me in Barcelona. We're happy to host here as well. Happy holidays, everyone. Thank you, Team Alumni, for putting this together. Wishing everyone a wonderful rest of the day or evening, wherever you find yourself. Okay, and for any of those who are going to be traveling to Europe or wherever you're going to be, like South America, reach out to your alumni network. It's wonderful. Tap into us. You've got wonderful hosts wherever you're going to find yourselves. Thanks, everyone. Be safe and see you next time. Bye-bye.